Hello, everyone. Welcome to our part two conversation, a continuation of our conversation last Sunday. We're happy to see everyone who's about to start dropping into the Zoom now, and everyone who is who's watching us on Facebook Live. We hope you're all staying safe out there, especially if you're in the Bay Area with the smoke and, of course, the virus. So, joining me today, I have
John Henry, co-founder of Both Sides of the Conversation.
And I'm Rico Hamilton, co-founder of Both Sides of the Conversation.
And today we have a very special host who's about to introduce himself.
D'Anthony Jones. First of all, I'm honored to be here on both sides of the conversation and definitely looking forward to today's very important conversation and uplifting our trans Black family members. So I'm really excited. Got some amazing folks in the trenches here that I can't wait to introduce. So I'll let us finish the business of the top end. But yeah, I'm excited about today's conversation for sure.
All right, thank you. So before we head into letting you know, just introducing you to the folks we have on this amazing panel today, John is going to head into the rules. But before he does that, we just ask that you go ahead and share this video on Facebook, start a watch party, make sure everyone is included in this important conversation of today. And without further ado, John, do you want to go ahead and cite the rules?
Yes. So again, welcome to Both Sides of the Conversation. I know we have a lot of new members. Our rules and guidelines for the Sunday conversation is respect. We do not bash. We don't personalize. We don't use any kind of homophobic or hatred speech on here. For today's conversation, our unity rules, just so everybody knows on this conversation, this is not a debate. We are trying to build unity in our community. We're trying to understand and educate. So as you guys come on the chat, question and answer, if you want to come up and ask questions, please remember the rules. Remember the respect aspect of it. Your perspective is yours. Your perspective is not a prescription, and your perspective should be respected. So we want everybody to feel respected and validated on whatever they bring to the conversation today. But please try to be very thoughtful and respectful to your conversations or your comments or your chats. And again, if you want to come up and ask a question on the Zoom, please raise your hand. We'll have the chat and question and answer up. And also, if you want to come up, anyone you're welcome not to put your face up on the Zoom, or if you want to rename your name to come up, that's fine as well. We're trying to engage and bring everyone together. We want everybody to feel safe. So whatever you feel you need to either ask a question or share your experience, definitely we welcome it with respect. So I'm going to pass it back to Rico.
So without further ado, we're going to just go ahead right into the conversation. That's what Both Sides of the Conversation is about, is how about having these radical conversations to unify our communities. We want to have uncomfortable conversations. We want people to feel uncomfortable because that's a part of healing. That's a part of creating and engaging in conversation to make sure that we can be educated, we can understand each other, we can have empathy, we can have compassion for each other. And that's why this platform was created, was for us as Black people, is to understand each other, be one with each other, be allies with each other, and figure out how can we better support each other. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to D'Anthony Jones.
Well, once again, thank you all for being here today. And, you know, I'm just quite frankly humbled, especially coming off of last week's conversation. And, you know, just the overall importance of having these conversations, especially in the context of the times that we're living in, is this idea of promoting radical unity with each other. We, as a Black diaspora, have many different shades, colors, experiences, identities, and struggles. So, you know, I think it's important for us, you know, as you hear some of the stuff in the background, just important for us to really center each other in this movement and really be intentional about moving forward as a people, because we're stronger unified than we are divided. And that's what this is the ultimate end of, cutting down those walls that we put between each other in the Black community, especially in today's conversation, is no different. And I think today's conversation will go a long way in building that radical unity in the Black community, especially with our trans community and our broader LGBTQ plus community. Just reviewing the last conversation last week, and I definitely want you, Blanca Adams, to come on in and just talk about just the conversation we had last week and just some of her key takeaways. So you, Blanca Adams, come on in. Definitely appreciate you just holding the floor with you last week, sister.
Yes, yes, yes. Welcome. And thank you again for having me on both sides of the conversation. To all of the hosts and guests and our new co-host, welcome. I'm Blanca Adams. I am born and raised a native in the Bay Area, traveled some states and seen some things. My pronoun is she, her. I am a queen first. I'm a woman second, and I am happily married to a woman. So I'm the LGBT, and I personally just love being in love with a woman. And my sister, my wife is an African American woman as well, and so we both last week took a lot away from the conversation. Um, my brother John Henry is one of your co-hosts, and he has always been my brother, and he's always been my support team there. So I want to just, acknowledge my son-in-law out there in the world, Quentin Hadley. Love you, trans, and I want to understand as well. The conversation taken away from last week, how important it is to heal from the wounds and the traumas that we were plagued to have from religion, or maybe it was family that brought you up with the homophobic belief. I also left away feeling very good and confident that I've taught my children to love unconditional. Everything don't look the same. Everything don't dress the same. Everybody don't sound the same. Um, and there was a lot of dialogue in the community, and I want to take the conversation this week and share with you guys that this is important that we have this conversation. I am a part of the community. I've been a community activist, I think, all of my life. I've helped the bigger African American community, and I also want to include my LGBT because, again, we have educations, we have jobs, we have visions for the whole community. It's not a personal thing. So I'm just here to answer some pressing questions I know a lot of you may have. I am a mother, I'm a grandmother, I have stepchildren, I have a community that I have a lot of resources and questions from. And so today I'm just ready to add on to it that love is love. And just because we don't look the same and we don't sleep with the same people, I think we all on both sides of the conversation want to heal the African American community. So send us your questions, bring the love. We know it's hard for a lot of people to talk about. You can post it, you can send it behind the scenes. We're going to look at all questions and we're going to bring it up until we can get peace and healing in our community.
Thank you so much, Blanca, and just once again uplifting that radical unity aspect. And I know that we're centering, a lot of what the trans community has dealt with. And today we have a few of my special friends and just allies in the community. I'll pass it over to both of them. Let's start off with Aria, and I identify as he, him, as far as pronouns, so be sure to state your pronouns. But just for your introduction, who you are, where you're from, the work you do, and why you are proud to be Black. So if we can get Aria on up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on this conversation. I have the lovely opportunity of being able to do these kinds of conversations across the world now, but it always feels the best when it's at home in San Francisco. So thank you, DeAnthony, Jada, you, Blanca, John, and Rico for including our voices. My name is Aria Saeed. I use she, her pronouns. I am from Oregon originally, but I moved to San Francisco as a teenager. And the Tenderloin in particular has been home for me. One second. Sorry. And
I know what
so Tenderloin is home for me. I'm sorry if y'all hear noise. I'm here with my sisters. I'm not in San Francisco right now, but we're having a good time. And yeah, I am a transgender advocate and political strategist. Most of my work has been rooted in creating public policy towards protecting sex workers, trans people, LGBT people, of course, and intersex children. I've been fortunate to work in City Hall in San Francisco, at the Human Rights Commission, et cetera, once upon a time. But I would say I'm most known for my work in co-founding and being the director of the Transgender District, which is the world's first legally recognized district of its kind. And we are in the Tenderloin, which boasts perhaps the densest transgender population of any other neighborhood in San Francisco, and any other neighborhood in an American city in the country. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Aria, for just all your leadership, holding it down. CNN did a piece on the transgender district in San Francisco, and of course, Aria Saeed was highlighting just some of the work that she had contributed to that effort and is leading right now. So thank you so much, Aria, for your leadership in our city. On over to Quan Harrison. I'll let them, until the pronouns are known, introduce themselves. So Quan, thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Thank you all so much for having me on this wonderful podcast and elevating this very timely conversation around Black unity and centering Black people and, really uplifting equity within the Black community. My name is Taquan Harrison. I identify as a queer, non-binary individual. I'm originally from Inglewood, California. I go by he, they pronouns. Currently, I work as the LGBTQ policy advisor at the San Francisco Human Rights Commission under Director Cheryl Davis. And a lot of my work centers around really addressing the intersectionalities of the diverse LGBTQ community in San Francisco, really focusing on addressing anti-Black racism, in particular with police violence, so public safety, violence prevention, as well as safety and wellness for our communities, because supporting the safety and well-being of any community, which means make sure they have adequate access to food resources, housing support, education access are, fundamental things that folks need in order to fully thrive and be their best selves. I'm also the co-founder of the Queer and Trans Youth United in Power Fellowship, which is out of the mayor's office and is the first workforce development program of the city centering queer and trans youth, particularly Black and brown trans youth of color who face super high rates of disparities in regards to employment access, as well as homelessness and marginally housed populations. And I'm super excited to be here with my Black brothers and sisters and expansive folks to have this conversation. It's a really interesting time to be in city and government, and it's to me, it's a blessing to be able to center my Blackness and Black experience, because you talk about people like Marsha P. Johnson and Angela Davis, and just the whole legacy and lineage of James Baldwin. To have Black trans siblings centered in conversation, uplifting them is just very, it's amazing. So I'm really happy to lend to this conversation and uplifts the greatness of the folks who are doing this work in community. So thank you for having me.
Both of
D'Anthony,
you.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Damn, you really in the trenches. You really putting in the work. I had to say it like that. I had to put a little Inga Hood. I had to put some Inga Hood on it. So hey, I commend you for all the good work that you're doing. That was, Hey, I want to give you some snaps for that, for sure.
And just, Aria and Taquan, if you could answer the last part of that, why are you happy to be Black? Like, why are you proud to be Black?
Aria, do you want to go first?
I can give it a try. How could I forget that? Blackness for me, it's such a huge piece of who I am. I'm grateful that I don't burn in the sun, that I will never age. I love our resourcefulness and resilience. We can turn water into wine. There's something magical about when we come together to celebrate and have joy, but also to protest and to unite under a cause of abolishing the oppression that we experience as a community. And yeah, just love everything about us. We are the culture. And I think sometimes when we see white celebrities who don our culture as costume, there is an insecurity, but we should know without doubt that it comes from us, that it's not cool until we do it, and that we are the originals, and we should be confident in that. And that's what I love about, one of the many reasons I love being Black, and proud to be a Black woman, a Black trans woman. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Aria. Taquan?
Yeah, sorry for missing the question originally. I just love our culture. I love the way we walk. I love the way we talk. I love the way we just, like Aria said, come together to celebrate and to be around each other. I got the privilege of growing up in Inglewood, California, which is a historically Black, middle-class neighborhood. So for me, it was just like growing up and seeing Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs and, Black love and couples and solidarity and, things like that. And, being around my grandmother and learning about, my roots in Texas in the South and how much we have given to this country and this country hasn't given to us. So I just love the legacies that we're able to establish here as African Americans, descendants of chattel slavery here in America. So I think that our culture, our food, everything, the way we talk, the way we are as human beings, we're just magnificent beings on this earth. So yeah, I can talk all day, but thank you.
Well, thank you both. And just, you touched on the reason why I'm just proud to be Black. And I'm sure everyone on this call, like, that we do come together and that we are literally the textbook of when it comes down to organizing. A lot of people overlook the fact that we're like the model when it comes down to organizing, no matter where we are. And just even talking about those roots in, just the LGBTQ community, Sylvia P. Johnson, you had Miss Major, Mother Major, Compton's cafeteria riot that happened in the Tenderloin. And, Compton's cafeteria was the impetus of even creating the transgender district here in the city. And that started here before Stonewall. And if you look at our role in the civil rights movement, you look at Bayard Rustin, who quite frankly never gets, recognized in this conversation. The Black trans women that started throwing the first punches when it came down to the Stonewall riots, even them being overlooked, and then making Hollywood movies not covering the Black and brown folks that were centered in these movements. So just us as Black folks, everything that we do is emulated by someone. And of course, oftentimes in the wrong way. So no one could tell our stories like us. And that kind of leads into the first question. We all start our journey towards self-consciousness and identity somewhere, and that journey looks different for all of us in life. So for you, Aria, kind of tell us what that journey has looked like for you, and when you decided to go on the journey of transitioning, some of the reactions and challenges that you have faced and continue to face, and just how important it is to advance the work of promoting the dignity and making sure that our Black trans family members are treated with dignity?
Yeah. Well, when I was born a baby. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, my sisters are here and they're cracking up. It's an inside joke. No, so not obviously. Why would I do that to myself? When I was born, I was born sex assigned male at birth. And y'all be quiet. I'm filming. Thank you. Okay. My socialization, obviously I was raised to be a boy, but my journey was that of displaying very sort of feminine behavior and tendencies and traits from a very early age. And so my experience as a child, I do remember being policed. For being feminine. Why you walk like that? Why you talk like that? Why your voice do that? Why you walk on your tiptoes? Boys don't do that. Boys don't sit in the kitchen with their moms. You need to go outside and play with them boys. Like all these ways in which I was never congruent with what I was born to be, right? And so I think when I transitioned, it wasn't a surprise. To my family, I think it was disappointment. I grew up very religious, and I think my family kept holding to this idea that I needed to try to not be who I was innately. That I wasn't trying hard enough. I wasn't praying hard enough. I wasn't reading the Bible enough. I wasn't going to the prayer warriors enough. That I wasn't resisting my urges to put on lipstick or girls' clothing or whatever it was. And I think, I think that is my experience as a child in particular. So I transitioned as a teenager. I transitioned in high school, and I think because of the time that I transitioned in, it was so much different than it is now. I think now we witness, and you all get to see trans people on television sharing our stories with agency, right? And full-bodied experience and narratives. That was not the case when I transitioned. I transitioned around a time when Isis King came out on America's Next Top Model, for those who may remember that time. Shortly after, Laverne Cox would be on I Want to Work for Diddy, season 1. I'm taking y'all back. And so back then, people didn't know what the word transgender was. They just thought I was really, 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 really gay. Like really gay. And I think, I was definitely the scandal of my neighborhood growing up in Portland. In the Black community is even smaller in Portland, Oregon than it is in San Francisco. So everyone knew my tea because my dad was a bishop. So everybody knew, or anybody who was anybody in the Black community knew. And I really struggled with that. And I struggled with finding my space in Black community, because as a Black trans woman, I think you try to find community with other communities, right? And it was very natural for me to start finding community and non-Black, queer, and trans people, but I never had that 100% feeling of belonging. I still had to translate myself. And, I think as I aged into my 20s, my early 20s, I'm 30, by the way. But as I aged into my early 20s, really seeing that I didn't have to downplay my Blackness, that I could be in fellowship with other Black people was, I think, a huge experience for me. But I think the reactions were mixed, to answer your question, D'Anthony. I think the reactions, a lot of people didn't understand. But I think a lot of people were also empathetic. And I think now that I'm 30 and I look back, I think my parents, you know, as we watch and witness and experience the world as Black people right now, I think my parents were only doing what they thought was best to maintain my safety. Of course, they were holding on to their beliefs and their experiences, but I think ultimately, you know, being a feminine Black person who was born male and transitions to be a woman, and as we see the magnitude of violence that Black trans people face, in particular Black trans women, I think my parents were just trying to safeguard me to be able to breathe in the world, because the world is already hard on Black people. It's already hard on Black women, and it's especially hard on Black trans women.
Thank you so much. And you, Blanca, I see you have a question. You raised your hand.
So my question was, and thank you for sharing that. I think we touched a little bit on it last week, that, and I want to know if it's safe to say, but our African American trans community are finding their way of being accepted more in our Caucasian and other counterparts. And I'm trying to make sure, or trying to understand, is that safe to say that that's okay because the population is more accepting? And then how, I want to learn today, like, how can we be better in the Black community to accept our trans community and keep you guys included in our conversation, even under the LGBT, because our young, and you're pulled up a very young age, so our young 25 to 40 are expressing themselves in the white communities, and then they're killing us and they're getting us out really on drugs really bad. So how do we change that? And then what was your struggle like, you know, dad and mom, did they ever get past that point, or was it really brutal? Because I'm trying to connect and understand church and trans and how we all can work together. But I have a lot of questions around it, but I want to know, why is it that we always end up finding our way in the Caucasian community and then we don't see our way back out of it? And thank for this conversation, we're talking about it, but I want to see how we can fill in that gap, and so we know how to better support our trans, even from a lesbian point of view.
Arya, I think you're on mute.
Okay. There were a couple questions in there that I want to make sure I answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, you, Blanca. The first question was about us being accepted more in like white
in the white community, or in the Castro, in the white area, and why are we not connecting that dot?
And that may be a misconception. So I'm interested.
I was gonna say, I don't know if we're fully embraced in those spaces. I think in some ways we are. I mean, there's tolerated and there's accepted, right? And so I think my experience has been that I wasn't fully accepted into white spaces either. I think that is the plight of Black, queer, and trans people, is that we end up, if you look at our tradition as people, we end up finding each other and creating our own spaces. So if anyone knows about ballroom culture, pageants, those are all like families of Black, queer, and trans people coming together because we couldn't find a space that fully embraced us, both in our Black families and in these white, queer communities. So I think legislatively and intellectually, a lot of white people tend to be more progressive. But we don't know what goes on in their homes either. I think, you know, in ways when we think about Black families, I think, yeah, I think we have to dig deeper. I think there's a lot of complicated experiences, right? So we find that my experience and my worldview, I witnessed Black cis women who were masculine definitely being more accepted in Black families than I was, right? Like there's a way in which like the studs, you know, tomboys, etc. Like you kind of get a pass, and it's not to say that you don't hear from Big Mama and Mom that, you know, when you gonna live right, when you gonna get married, when you gonna blah 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 blah, right? Like that's not ever to dismiss that, but I think socially, you know, they still get invited to the cookout. They still get invited to the family reunion. Whereas if you're gay or a trans woman or feminine, if you are invited, you're the talk of the whole event. At least that was my own experience. And I think my family in the beginning, of course, they had a limited understanding. And I think religion played a huge role in that. I don't, you know, my mom would often be like, I have to give you to God because I just can't, right? And that was her way of coping. But as they saw that it wasn't a phase, I think my relationship with my family started to heal a bit more. I think they always loved me. I think they just had a complicated experience and their own expectations for me. They were mourning the ideas that they had projected onto me, that I was going to be a successful doctor with a wife and kids, and you know, like I was going to be very normal. And instead I showed up with platinum blonde hair, like, hey, hi, like they were not having that. Like, and I think they had to grieve that. But I think ultimately my mom, I remember my mom and I had a conversation and she was just like, I love you and I'm, you know, I don't agree with you, but I can't like not live without you. Like you are my child and I'm trying to understand. And I'm going to try to understand. And I don't agree with it, but I love you and I can't like exile you or, you know, cross you out. And so I think, yeah, I think as I've gotten a little bit older, yeah, I talk to my mom like at least 2 to 3 times a week. Like it's so much different than it was. And I think we've had our roller coaster of experiences. But I think my family, in the most part, even if they don't agree with me, they still respect me. I wish, of course, that they agreed with me. I think my life is fabulous. I think I'm a great person. You know, I think, yeah, I think all those things, and they know those things. But I think, again, religion and worldview and stuff do shape a lot of our stigma. And culture, right? A lot of our cultural stuff can play a role in how we see each other.
And thank you so much, Aria, for answering that and going into detail, into depth. I mean, those experiences are important into the greater idea about Black liberation too. You know, is this idea of liberation only supposed to go to one person or the other? How do we make sure that Black liberation means just that, us living our full and authentic self? So, you know, thank you for sharing that experience. And the thing about you, Blanca's question was this idea of allyship too. And that's where, you know, I wanted to shift to you, Taquan. What has your path towards allyship look like in just being a Black queer individual and supporting the trans community? What has that path look like and why is it important to serve as allies? And how do you do that?
Great question, D'Anthony. And for me, first off, I wanted to start off by saying trust Black women. And when I mean Black women, I mean all Black women. Black women are amazing and are great and are doing this work incredibly. So making sure that in our larger Black space that we're supporting and uplifting Black women. Allyship for me, I want to kind of, troubleshoot the term ally, because I feel like in this space right here in particular, we are talking a little bit about allyship and, standing with our Black trans brothers and sisters and expansive people. But I think that what we really want to get to is being an accomplice, which is meaning actually dismantling and challenging these things within the space, because it's good to be like Black trans lives matter and going to a protest, which we need that, as a part of, the policy process, which is bringing public awareness to these issues. But it's also, when you are at home and you hear these homophobic and transphobic comments, it's you calling those folks out and calling those spaces. Is actually working with our brilliant Black trans leaders within the Bay Area, in San Francisco. It's, educating yourself on simple things like pronouns. And I know that it's something that for a lot of people, it seems, very unnatural, but we use pronouns all the time. And I think that it is a very simple thing to unlearn, and misgendering someone and calling them, a he, an it, or giving them the improper pronoun can be very harmful and a very scary situation for a lot of folks. So I think that it looks like doing that internal work. So it's, why do I feel this way about, Black trans people in particular? Where does this hate and this violence come from? And I think that when you get down to it, it's just pure ignorance. You know what I mean? Like Black trans folks are not out harming or, hurting people. It's just that it just challenges your notion, understanding of things. And I think that that's a lot of the internal work that we have to do as Black people to bridge solidarity with folks in the community. And I think that it is, challenging and having these conversations like this to uplift and talk about these things. Because, if we don't get it right, you know what I mean? It's just gonna continue to have this endless cycle of murder and violence. And, we have to already as a community face so much within the larger society with white supremacy, capitalism, and all those different just systems that are just really impacting our people. And I think that, a lot of it comes with being an accomplice, which is, dismantling and challenging those things within our larger space. And also talking about healing too, as well. And how as a community do we, talk about our traumas as people, and where are these traumas that we have as people, causing more violence within our spaces. So I think that this is a part of the work that we need to do as Black people. And then, I think that that's kind of some of the things that I would say. It's education, it's doing the internal work. It's actually, I'm sure that we all have LGBTQ people of expansive experiences within our family. It's talking and meeting with them. It's creating a more safe and inclusive space for them to exist, for them to thrive. And that's pretty much it. I don't think that it's any magic trip or wand or, we need to, do some diversity training or anything like that. It's just kind of coming to it with humility and love, and that we're human beings and we bleed the same blood and we come from the same lineage. And we are doing ourselves a disservice as a community, and not to pathologize our community. I feel like the Black community, the Latinx community, the Asian American white community also have their instances of homophobia and transphobia. I think that just the history of white supremacy plays out in our community, where it shows that yes, there is intercommunal violence, but there's also violence happening in other spaces too as well. So I think that it's very nuanced. And I'm happy that we're talking about this. So those are some of my ideas.
And thank you for uplifting that, because we don't want to pathologize our community. It's just this conversation even about, state violence against, our Black folks in general. This idea that, oh, well, y'all need to talk about Black on Black crime. Well, your statistics show that if you're in community, you're more likely to be not only oppressed, but a victim of violence by somebody that looks like you, because that's how communities operate. So this idea that we're the only ones dealing with this, I'm glad that you raised that we're not. And I think it's important to also hold that in the same hand as us becoming more conscious about how we treat each other. So, thank you for uplifting that, Taquan. And as somebody had taught me, oppression is a virus that we've all been exposed to. And, just this idea of these systems impacting us, because that's what we're seeing play out. So I definitely am glad that we're centering our responsibility to become conscious people. Moving on to the next question, and just this idea of building, accomplice, a culture of being an accomplice. I like that, and I'm glad that you raised that, because I'm reminded of John Brown. He wasn't an ally, but he sure was an accomplice. He went and chopped off some oppressors' heads, and they really made him pay for that. But that's the type of accomplice that I want, somebody who's going to do the fighting for me, be the offensive lineman. So I definitely appreciate that, and you bringing up that. And just this idea of being an accomplice, I want to play a video for everyone, just of a brother. I forget his name escapes me, but Aria had shared this video on
Consciously.
So we got Brother Consciously here. I'm going to share my screen and play this video right quick.
Hey, today on Heteronormative Contradictions, let's expose how the same dudes that we talking about, man, she transgender, bro, she ought to tell me. It's the same dudes rocking fake necklaces, fake earrings, lying about how much money they got, and driving a car that's really homeboys. Listen, I ain't trying to throw no shade or trying to create no stigmas, but y'all really be attracted to trans women, and y'all get mad at trans women because y'all attracted to them. Make that shit make sense. A lot of y'all are so insecure with your own sexuality, you have a hard time coming to grips with trans women can be fine. They're not tricking you though, you feel me? Just because you found them attractive is not their fault. You know what I mean? You know what? I'm not even gonna correlate fault with attraction. You know what I'm saying? But what I am saying is you cannot blame the attraction on the person you're attracted to. It is not their fault that you're attracted to them, man. Some of y'all be so heteronormative, you don't recognize that gender identity and sexuality is two different things. A lot of folks don't disagree with this, but I believe that trans women are women.
Wow, that and that just kind of goes in to my next question, and just unpacking some of that, because I know that this is just one of the issues that our Black, especially Black trans women deal with. This idea of being faulted for someone being attracted to you, and you now having this burden to prove yourself to them. You, Blanca, I know you had a question, but if you don't mind, I'm gonna go and let Aria kind of just talk about some of the challenges that Black trans people, especially Black trans women, deal with.
Yeah. Can I say that I think I really love the videos that Consciously has and the content that he has been putting out. I think people are both enamored by and in shock because it's being delivered from someone that is not trans, right? Or someone who's not gay, that it's being delivered by someone who is attractive, right? And so why is this like cisgender, heterosexual, masculine, beautiful man speaking up for Black trans women, right? It's a complicated experience, both in social media, Black community, as well as in the trans community. I think what he points out in a way that I think he's in particular highlighting how, as Black trans women, the level of violence that we experience tends to be from Black men, right? Black cisgender men. And how there is stigma and justification of the violence against us, right? And so oftentimes it comes from men having shame for being attracted to us, But I want to highlight that most men are trans attracted, right? And I'm gonna boldly say that because between me and my girlfriends here, if I could tell you the list of rappers and basketball players that have been in our DMs, men that we've been in relationship with, both celebrated and like normal, like people would get very upset, right? People cling to this ideal that that the men that engage with trans women are gay, right? That is why the cisgender men that tend to have relationships with us have shame about being with us, is because they don't want to be labeled as gay. Because in Black community, being gay is still bad, right? As much as we see the Real Housewives of Atlanta and Basketball Wives talking like trans women and looking like trans women with false eyelashes and highlight contour, being like, yes, there is still a stigma, right? That's rooted in there that says being gay is bad. Yesterday, I posted some content on Instagram. The most people that had issue with it, I was talking about Megan Thee Stallion being shot at by Tory Lanez, right? A lot of people may not know, someone made a joke that went viral that was like, oh, she got shot at because she confessed that she's really a man, right? And how the womanhood of Black cis and trans women consistently gets stripped, that our femininity gets taken away in these moments. These are just things that I'm downloading, and how we have created and we live in a culture that polices women and their bodies. So a lot of the response that I got was from cisgender women, being like, oh, but you really a man, you're this, you're that. I'm like, girl, like we have more shared experiences than differences, right? We are in a lot of ways different. I'm never denying that, but we have more shared experience and shared struggle. And so, yeah, at present, Black trans women are experiencing a genocide that often Black people do not talk about. I think it's 27 Black trans women have been murdered so far this year. And I wanna express a little bit more about that, because I think it's very easy to think that we're this big community, right? Because people are now having access to us on television or in City Hall or workplaces, and it can sort of feel like transgender culture is ever present. Ooh, now they got me. Now they asking us to say pronouns at work, right? Like these ways in which it can feel like transgender people are everywhere. We're actually a very small population in the United States. We make up less than 1%, right? The United States has a population of over 330 million people. And so less than 1% is a huge, right? A huge like difference, right? 330 million, less than 1%. So we're actually a very small population. And so if you break that down by race, we're even smaller. And so the magnitude of violence in that so many Black trans women are facing not just murder. We hear about murders now, but with the cases of Iana Dior, a Black trans woman who was at the gas station and she was attacked by 15 Black men, right? People recorded it, no one jumped in to help her. The only person that jumped in to help her was the Arab man that owned the corner store, right? And it was begrudgingly because she was getting blood on the floor, right? Because her nose was broken. So how we're not allowed to even be human when we're not being dignified, right? And then there were 3 Black trans women that were attacked while waiting for an Uber in LA last week, right? And how it was recorded and they were teased one of the women was knocked unconscious with a crowbar, and people walked by, looked, and kept walking. The police showed up. They didn't want to call the police, but the police showed up and kept driving because they were trans. And so I struggle with this because I think in a lot of ways I do get to lead a charmed life, right? I'm very blessed and grateful that I am around people who affirm me. I am living and breathing. I'm healthy. I'm housed. I have a job. Do you know what I mean? And I think part of it is because I do live in San Francisco, and that is a testament to San Francisco. But I also know that so many of my sisters live in the Tenderloin and they live in abject poverty. And everyone says, go to a job training program, go do this, go do that, and then you'll get help. So many of us have gone through those pipelines and then nothing. We show up to job interviews in San Francisco and people will laugh at us when we come into interview. And then that further deters us, right? From even trying to get basic income to go work at Starbucks or Jamba Juice or whatever, or to do street cleaning for a stipend, with the GA office. Like, there are ways in which culturally we are consistently marginalized and sort of pushed deeper into abject poverty. And then, of course, the level of violence. I think, as we talk about Black liberation, we also have to talk about sort of how our movements can sometimes be patriarchal and how they highlight the experiences of Black cisgender men. There's a reason that you can name George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, right? And the long list of Black men that have been killed by the state. But there's also a way in which you cannot name the list of Black women that have been murdered by police, right? Or Black trans women being murdered. I think that's important to note too, is how oftentimes our movements are led by Black cis and trans women for Black liberation, and yet we decenter ourselves to promote the well-being and the sanctity of life for Black cis men, when we should be promoting the sanctity of all Black life, right? In day-to-day living, I think there is a culture that because Black cis women are particularly marginalized by other women, and there's this culture in which it is okay to make jokes about Serena Williams's body and say that she looks like a man. It's okay to call Wendy Williams Wendell, right? It's okay to make a joke that Megan Thee Stallion might be born male, like if that's her business, that's her business. Or that it was implied that Ciara, the singer, was intersex, right? And how Black women are experiencing their womanhood being taken away over and over and over again. And so then there's a dynamic between Black women, Black cis women and Black trans women, where you'll see, and this is my own worldview, sometimes I'll walk down Mission Street by the GA office and, a Black cis woman, a dude will look at me or try to talk to me, and then a Black cis woman will walk by, oh, that's a man, right? And I'm like, girl, if he don't know, he's still gonna want it. You just helping me. No shade. Like, they all live at some point. I'm just saying. I think, that comes from a place of scarcity and insecurity. And it because of a culture that has consistently attacked other Black women, right? That sometimes it's hard for us to be in harmony with each other. There's also a way in which our culture is patriarchal because in hip hop, which is our pop music, it has become pop music for the rest of the world as well. Bisexuality in cisgender women is always celebrated. Two women together making out, yes, but two men together, no, right? that men have created a culture where it's not okay for men to hug each other or to hold hands or to cry, or those are all parts of our culture that then create toxicity and allowing us to be full-bodied people. The fact that so many celebrated Black men had so much to say about Zaya Wade, Dwayne Wade's transgender child, who is a child, they're like 11 or 12, and they were policing her genitals, her body, right? And having these public discussions on those things. And then months later, Megan Thee Stallion is shot by a Black man that she might be in a relationship with, and no one wants to talk about how oftentimes we are experiencing violence in intimate partner relationships, right? And that's what we should be focusing on. Like, I could go on and on and on. I feel like I'm straying from your question.
No, it's totally fine. And you know, you answered that and then some. And it kind of actually answered the next question I was going to ask you. But, you know, and as far as Taquan, just actually you, Taquan, in your capacity in the Human Rights Commission, considering all that Aria had uplifted, what does uplifting the Black trans community and the trans community in general look like, both in your government role and in general?
Hey, D'Anthony, hey, everyone. I think that it can look like many things, but I can say first and foremost that the San Francisco Human Rights Commission is fully invested in the leadership of trans folks in San Francisco, in particular, Black trans leadership. And that has been said through, you know, our public engagement legislation process, as well as where we also spend our funding and investment. During COVID-19, in the initial phases, and I think in March of this year, the San Francisco Human Rights Commission has given over $100,000 to support Black trans organizations to do COVID relief funds efforts, to help pay for back rent, also for food and grocery resources, to support formerly incarcerated Black trans community members, sex workers, and marginally housed populations. Back in 2014, the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, in partnerships with the SF LGBT Center, did a community violence prevention needs assessment to survey violence against LGBTQ folks, but particularly looking at trans and non-binary community members. And from that was able to get $1.5 million from the add-back process, which is after the Board of Supervisors, like, you know, once they submit the budget, folks can ask for additional funding, and that funding was housed over at the Human Rights Commission, and we were able to get that funding to support trans Latina, Latinx trans programming in San Francisco, and Black specific and other organizations within San Francisco. So those are some of the things, but Cheryl, Director Davis, meets with our leaders all the time, and with the mayor, Mayor London Breed. They are aware of the, you know, disparities that are going on, in particular against Black trans women. And I heard Aria talking about, you know, things as simple as housing first. Without housing, how can you get a job? How can you take care of yourself? Without housing, how can you, you know, really thrive? As somebody who is a formerly homeless youth, 3 years ago when I first moved to San Francisco, which is, you think that's a long time ago, but it wasn't, you know, it was talking about the difficulties of trying to navigate these systems. So those are some of the ways that we've invested, as well as through my Queer and Trans Youth Fellowship through the Mayor's Opportunities for All initiative through the Mayor's Office, which to me is just policy using my lived experience as a Black, queer, non-binary person navigating the homeless response system and the economic, you know, workforce development models, and trying to, you know, fill in those gaps and put those queer and trans youth within, you know, organizations like the Transgender District. Me and Aria are partnering and hosting some youth there, and at the LGBT Asylums Project in the Mayor's Office and other spaces in San Francisco. So those are some of the ways in which we've supported Black trans leadership, but we can be doing a lot more. And as we talking about like the reinvestment of funding from, over-resourced departments like SFPD and other city departments. We have been working, and I've been meeting with Black, trans, and LGBTQ members to talk about what some of that funding would look like and where would it go to support some of those, impactful policies and programs to really sustain those community members. And it's still workshopping now, but I'm super excited to, continue having those conversations and continue to bring visibility. We're actually hosting an event next Friday at City Hall called Bridging Black Trans Lives, Advancing Racial Equity within the Black community at City Hall. And that's going to be in partnership with Wealth and Disparities in the Black community, Service Community Rights Commission, the Transgender District, TGIJP, Taj's Coalition. And that's going to be a great forum for the Black community to come and stand in solidarity with our trans and non-binary Black community members and also LGBTQ folks. So I'll make sure to share that out too as well.
You're going to send us an invite, right?
Yeah, I put it in the chat.
Of course. Shout out to Aria, shout out to Miss Felicia Jones for holding it down in the community.
And definitely, please send the information. You can even put it in the chat, because then I could share it on my page, and I'm pretty sure that the team at both sides of the conversation, you Jada, John, and Rico can also promote it too. And I'm glad you touched on this, because we kind of had talked about this, myself and you, Blanca, last week, with this idea of the Black community, unfortunately, being put in positions where we have to seek dignity on the down low, so to speak. We cannot be our authentic selves, or we penalize each other for trying to be our authentic self, and thus you create these pockets to where, just like Aria had alluded to, you find community wherever you can find it. And oftentimes, it's in a way to where it's like, well, I'm finding dignity, but in the most unhealthy way, because of the fact that I can't get access to this, that, the third. Some of our trans community members, and I know Aria had touched on this before, like even trying to get a job and get basic income, they're turned away. We just literally had a Supreme Court decision in 2020, mind you, that basically said you cannot fire anyone for being transgender. And that's the thing, but you can't get fired if you're never hired. So you can't even get the dignity of getting in the door. And just like talking about how Black community in general has always faced this policing, and we're only perpetuating it on each other right now. Thus, we're pushing each other in a box more and more, and I think the similarities are glaring, right? What the down low is for gay men, or what just even if you're looking at the history of our transgender community, like Compton's Cafeteria was literally the only place where the trans community in San Francisco felt safe. So we had issues even here with accepting the trans community. And unfortunately, when we create these systems of oppression, that's what gets perpetuated. Moving right along, in fact, you answered my next question in just this part of the forum and conversation. Next one is basically expanding that idea of why we face these type of oppressions, and the reason why we perpetuate these oppressions on each other is this overall system, right? So, I think it's important to uplift how people under the LGBTQ diaspora, especially our trans community, have to navigate even racism. So with that, Aria, just in terms of walking that balance between a lack of acceptance in your own community, being Black, but also how do you balance that with dealing with day-to-day racism?
I think there's a way that other people have compartmentalized my body, right? Or the bodies of people with compounded experiences. So not only am I Black, I'm also a woman, I'm also trans, right? And I think those things, and then I'm plus size and other things, right? So those things compounded shape my daily experience in life. I think this is where Dr. Crenshaw's intersectionality is also really important to consider, because the impact of racism may be very different for someone like D'Anthony. It may be very different for Jada. It may be very different for Taquan, you Blanca, John, and Rico, in ways that it also may be different for me. I think I deal with I deal with it in many different ways, in San Francisco. In my career, where people, in day-to-day interactions, and sometimes it's microaggressions, right? We live in a liberal city, so our racism is a bit more hidden, versus when you go to the South, it's a bit more open. I'm in the South right now, and I just saw someone with a Trump sign on their car, and it's open, and I'm not used to that, right? I live in the city where it's behind closed doors. Like, that's the racism is kitchen table talk. It's not pronounced. And so I think, sorry, D'Anthony, the question is how are trans people navigating it, or how am I navigating it?
I mean, kind of both, because I know that, I'm just basically trying to paint the idea that, you being a Black trans woman and just the trans community in general, still have the Black trans community has to balance, the oppression they face within community and around community with racism. And I think that's important because many people think it's all separate, and it's not. And,
No, people do think it's separate. I think, to Black people, I'm just trans. That is something that I definitely experienced, especially when I was doing advocacy in City Hall. I'll never forget this moment. Me and my sister, Toni Michelle, were in this training for executive directors, and they said, all the Black people go over here for the breakout group, all the women go over here, and then all the transgender people go over here. And me and her were like, so where do we go? Because we're all three. And they're like, well, you just need to pick one. And that has always stuck with me, because I don't think in real life, the way the world is going to interact with me is going to be as a Black woman who is trans, right? And so because I carry those things, I experience racism just like everyone else. In fact, more so because I'm also trans. So then there's transphobia paired with racism. And then there's misogyny because I'm a woman paired with transphobia and racism, right? Does that make sense? I think for a lot of Black men, because they are men and cisgender, they're only going to think about racism, right? But Black cis women have to think about racism and misogyny, right? Did I not get the job because I'm a woman, or because I'm a Black woman, or is it because I'm Black, right? And then as a trans person, it's like a Black trans woman. Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm trans? Or is it because I'm Black? Or is it because I'm a Black trans woman, right? Those things, like the compoundedness of it, I can never fully gauge if it's rooted in race, or if it's rooted in transphobia, or if it's rooted in misogyny, because I feel like I get it from all different sides. When it comes to jobs or housing, or even going into restaurants and the way that I'm treated sometimes, I never fully know if it's because I'm in San Francisco, the only Black person eating at this restaurant in Pacific Heights, or is it because the trans woman walked in, or the plus size woman, or what, do you see what I'm saying? I can never fully know, but I know that Black trans women are navigating racism, sometimes if not more than other Black people, because we're such a specific experience in the landscape of oppression, especially if you're visibly transgender, right? All of those things are going to play a role in how people interact with you, and how you find safety, how you're able to access resources, how if you voice your emotion, are you considered loud? Are you considered being angry? Are you, you know what I mean? Or are you actually crying out for help? Like all of those things. I see this in particular in nonprofits. So many Black trans people get suspended from services at these shelters and programs, right? I feel like we don't talk about those things enough, where it actually matters is oftentimes with resources. A white person can go into the shelter and have a hissy fit, yell, kick, scream, security comes up, right? And then they're asked to leave for an hour and come back and come get their shelter bed. If a Black trans woman comes to the shelter and does that, she's suspended for 90 days, right? And so those are the things that I've seen it in. When you're at your job and you're experiencing racism, I've experienced racism on my job, several jobs in San Francisco, oftentimes at the hands of people who are not white, right? Who are non-Black people who are perpetuating racism. And then when I say something, I'm the angry Black woman, right? But then because I'm trans, it's like, you should be grateful that we even gave you a job. Do you know how many of your people don't have jobs? Like, these are the things that I've had to experience. As an executive director, no one ever trusts me with funding. They think that my white staff are the ones in charge, right? That is something that always comes up. We want his approval. I'm like, I'm the boss. I sign the checks. I'm writing the grant. But they don't see it that way, right? We're not trusted to lead our own efforts. There's a gatekeeping that happens towards Black trans-led organizations in a way that does not happen for white LGBT organizations. And even with media, when they interview me, they're always trying to like find corruption. And I'm like, we don't bring in enough resources for it to be corruption. I have one of the lowest salaries of an ED in San Francisco. Like, where all these nuances, I think, shape and play. I've just in my career have been more silent about it until now. I think in this moment I've been more vocal. I've been more vocal than I ever have been, because I do think people need to know the ways that we're impacted. I think I was just socialized to just, my parents really sort of instilled in me like, this is a given and you're just gonna have to deal with it and like play the game. And so I feel like a large part of me being successful in my career is because I always just sort of took it in stride and, let it happen and just worked twice as hard. But I've been passed up for jobs in ways that my white peers who are queer and trans have not, both in the city of San Francisco as a government and in just in general and in my career. Like there's just ways that has always played a role. And I think I'm being long-winded, but I'm trying to say that that as Black people, we cannot, because someone has holds another oppressed identity, that we can't people are not single issue people. You're not just dealing with gay issues, right? If you're a Black gay man, like it's compounded. You're Black, you're gay, and a man. Like that's gonna be, you're gonna experience impact. And we can't single people's identities to just one. And it's very common to do that in Black spaces because I think the undercurrent is like, oh, that you're coming in playing a side. And I think in my experience doing coalition work with Black people lately is that we have to understand that we're not coming in with a side, we're coming in voicing an experience of groups that we know are often ignored.
And
it's about Black liberation.
And you know, it's important that you uplift that, because you know, I think it's all the same language, oppression, but in a different dialect, right? I always say, you know, we all speak English, but you know, a Southern dialect is different than how we speak in the West Coast. I mean, and in the East Coast is different than how you speak in the North, but it's still rooted in the same idea. We're speaking the same language in a different dialect. You know, you talk about how this statehood oppression is oftentimes levied in the nonprofit space. You know, even if we look at like this idea of just gatekeeping. I mean, you look at the equity programs in San Francisco for even the marijuana dispensaries. You know, you oftentimes see Black and brown entrepreneurs having to ride on the coattails of a white cannabis club owner or a white property owner to get access. And that kind of speaks to the problem in and of itself, this idea of marginalization and promoting that. So with that, I know we're running tight on time, but definitely I see Rico, and then I know we got some questions that we want to ask folks. We're going to end with one last thing, but Rico, you go ahead, go first.
Okay, no, I just wanted to, I'll be very short, but in listening to what Aria, what you were saying, like it really, as I'm listening, I hear a lot of the similarities that we face just as Black people in general. And I am very empathetic of just a lot of stuff that I just didn't know. I'm like, wow, like I really didn't know, you know, because sometimes I think we be in our own bubble and we fight for things and we're unaware of everything else that's kind of going on when we have to figure out like how do we fight for this cause and look at all the causes within this one cause, right? And be better accomplished to these different causes. Because as you were talking, I was just thinking about last week. I even spoke on my experience growing up as a young man in San Francisco, born and raised, and I studied contemporary and ballet dance. And I mean, I posted a video. I don't know if anyone's seen it of me dancing when I was younger, but I mean, I was very, very, very good. Like I went to School of the Arts, and I mean, I had a very prominent career, but I allowed the community to tell me what I should be. You know, like during that time, it's the 80s, and they're saying you shouldn't be wearing tights, you shouldn't be moving your hips like that, men don't dance like that. Like this is like, you know, just because I mean I could naturally do hip hop, but I felt that me going into contemporary or ballet dance would be a little bit more challenging, and I wanted the challenge. And I think that sometimes art, like for me, our people can be our worst enemy. And I say that just to say, like, it wasn't until I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm going to Vanderbilt University every single day. And I'm going to frat parties and sorority parties, and everyone is white. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the token Black dude. But in those spaces, I was able to be me, regardless of if they really accepted me or not. I was still able to be my natural self without putting on the facade of I'm the hardest man in the room, or I can't dance like how I really want to dance, or be who I really am. And I think that when I came back to San Francisco, that's what kind of shaped who I really am. And me being able to say, you know what, like you said, it's okay for me to cry and be a straight man, and all that's fine. It's okay for me to be exactly who I am naturally, regardless of what anyone says. So it's really enlightening to hear you share and kind of just hear some of the similarities that we face in our community, dealing with our people, and then just the systemic issues that we already know that's out there. I'm a real accomplice, so I'll be trying to figure out how can I get involved and how can I support.
Thank
Jada,
you.
I know Jada got a question before she answered the other question. Jada, you want to answer your question?
No. I'm gonna keep it going because I wanna make sure we cover all the bases before I jump in.
All right.
All right.
Go ahead. You go. Now I wanted to ask the question because I don't know, and I hope this is the correct way to ask it. I'm trying to understand, with the LGBTQ community, like what is the difference between the transgender woman and the queer? Like I don't understand the difference. I thought it was all one, so I'm just looking for education. Because I didn't really understand it was a difference. I just thought it was the transgender was just one deal. So I need education on that. And then
Sure.
I just also want to say that I appreciate the education, because even me working in the city, the trainings I've had, this is more education I've had than what's been given to me. And I didn't even understand the pronouns and stuff. So like that's new to me. I didn't even know like there was a way you pronounce. So I'm learning a lot. So I just wanted to ask that question because I didn't know.
Got it. Sorry. The way you were talking about pronouns was just really funny to me. I want to affirm something. I think there is this tendency to believe that trans people are the experts on everything. And I want you all to know that we are also learning too. So pronoun culture doesn't come from Black trans people. It has come from people who may be Black or white or whatever and have a non-binary experience. And the idea around it was so that you don't have to be the odd person out that needs to announce to the room what your pronouns are. And so creating a workplace culture where everyone says their pronouns was this idea that you then normalize it so that someone doesn't have to always self-advocate, right? Because usually we always have to be the one that's like, hey, I have an access need. Like if you're plus size and you can't fit into the chair at the college lecture room, you then have to go and ask for a chair to be accessible to you, right? Or if you have a disability or what have you. The idea of creating a culture where people shouldn't have to ask so that you're not deterring people and that you're making it safe is like what that comes from. But I'm also learning how to do it too. I fail at it all the time. And members of my community are like, Miss Ari, you can't do that. Like, and you correct it, you keep going and you learn and you do better. Your other question was about when I said queer and trans people. So when I say queer, it's usually, it used to be a negative term, right? So it used to be like a bad word to call someone a queer, but it's been like the word nigga, it's been reclaimed by LGBT people. And so usually though, when in conversation, when someone is saying queer, they're usually referencing a lifestyle or sexual orientation, like lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual. And you know what those mean, right?
No, I don't. So that's why I'm like, I don't know.
Yes, you do. You know what a lesbian is.
I mean, I know what a lesbian is. I mean,
You
I
know what a
asked
gay
because
person is.
yeah, but I mean, I asked that because that's what I mean. I'm born and raised in San Francisco, and when you said a queer, that was like a bad derogative term. So that's why I'm like, I don't. I mean, people on here don't know. So that's why I'm like, we're trying to educate people. I mean, even talking to
No.
D'Anthony
I know, but I think
it was like last week, even just saying trans. Like some people that, and I'm glad you said that. Not all people from your community understand this as well, because I've got offense from people saying trans. So they like, no, you have to say transgender. So I'm just trying to help educate the people. I mean, that's one of the best things about this is really just trying to educate so we know, because I don't want to cause offense to nobody, but it's like 50 different terms, 50 different acceptances. So I'm just trying to learn.
And I think that's good, because I think we all have to remember too, if we don't know the ignorance, we can't educate and make conscious, right?
Right.
It's just like the classroom. Teacher got to know you made a mistake to help you figure out what the best way to move forward is. So I also think we have to promote safe space. And I think Arya is right there with me when I say we have to create a pillow of comfort to make mistakes and to not be right all the time. Arya, I didn't know if you want to finish your thought. Sorry about that. And then I know your Blanca hat her
Well,
hand up.
Taquan, wait, I want to hear what Taquan got to say too. Hold on. Something.
No worries. I think that Aria did a great job to like fully explain it. And I think that we got to get away. We got to demystify gender and all those things. Like I feel like it's not as difficult as people make it seem. And I think that we get caught up in this LGBTQI, XYZ, all this stuff like that too as well. And I think that it's just humanizing the individual, and humanness is a praxis. It's a practice. It's asking somebody, how do you identify? I think it's that simple. And I think that when we talk about, you know, like Aria said, being queer is just, it's for me, it's a radical notion. It's like really challenging the status quo. It's like, you know, the idea of really owning and challenging systems. So I think for me, it's getting comfortable with just asking somebody, how do you identify? How can I support you? You know, how can I make this safe space for you? And, you know, how can we bridge language? And I think that that's another thing that we talk about in the Black community is creating a shared language to talk about these things. But first, as we are doing now, is coming to the table and having that conversation. So let's not make it too difficult for ourselves. I think that it is as easy as asking, you know, how can I support you, sister? How can I support you, brother? How can I support you, person?
I'm glad you said it like that, because you know, it's a lot of terms, and sometimes it is very confusing. So now I know I'll just ask, because sometimes I listen to the Breakfast Club and they got a couple of transgender people to come on, and Charlamagne's always like, "What's up, sis?" So I'm like, I don't know if that's like because he know them is cool, or is that what it is? You know, but one of the other things that I just wanted to, before I pass it on to, is what Aria reached out to earlier about support and breaking down the narrative. So a couple of things that she talked about on the violence. Definitely, you know, we don't support any violence towards anyone. But I know one of the challenges that sometimes I believe, and I'm just speaking out of my understanding too, is sometimes the support goes away, because I think a lot of people feel like when things happen to the transgender community, a lot of times, how do I say this? Something will happen, and then instead of it being the issue, it turns into like a hate crime. So let's just say, for instance, when you mentioned the transgender individual that was being attacked by people, and people were watching and recording. On the flip side of that, right, people will say, well, was it really because they was transgender? Which I understand 90% of it was, but we see day to day violence and things happening, people recording, not doing anything. And then it's like, is it really just the people now are just recording violence, or, you know, or is it highlighted because it's trans, right? And then the same thing with, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. Did you want to finish?
Yeah, and then the other thing was what she talked about, men liking the trans or whatever it was. But one thing that I've heard is, like, say somebody run into a transgender person in the club, and like you said, they might have that attraction to the person in the club, and it's almost that they feel like there's a deception part where, okay, they go out of the club and they don't tell them that they're a man, and they come out later and say, "Oh, I'm a man," and then they become violent.
Hold on. Okay.
And this is the education.
Wait, so this is the thing. Okay. So I want to go back to something that you had said, John. It's John, right?
It's John, yeah. Yeah, it's John.
So you had said your community when you were talking to me, but I want you to say our community.
Did I say? I thought I said in the community. I didn't say my.
No. Earlier when you were talking to me, you said I'm still learning about your community or something to that effect. But it's our community.
Okay.
You are a part of my community. We have shared experiences, just like I have shared experiences with Jada, D'Anthony, Rico, Taquan, you, Blanca. Like, we are a community, and in that community we have different ecosystems of experiences. But the Bible says all things work together for the greater good. Amen. Yes. So as far as I want to highlight this experience of deception, right? The reality is that you're not always going to be able to tell if someone is transgender, right? The reason why I said most men are trans attracted is because they don't immediately know what a person has in underneath their clothes, right? Like at face value, all of y'all may have been attracted to a trans person at some point. You don't know, like, especially because technology is updated. So I'm just saying. So there's that. I think this experience of tricking, it is very rare. That used to be the popular media takeout world star narrative to go to, is that these men are attracted to us and we're just deceiving them, we're not telling them, and then, oh shit, you a man, pop, pop, pop. That is not how it happens, ever. It happens after they didn't had sex with us multiple times. Let's make that clear. The reality is a lot of men are attracted to trans people, right? It's the shame that comes with it if their friends find out. That's where it comes from. I had a very lucrative career as a sex worker, and most of my clients were Black men who were football players, basketball players, lawyers, whatever, you name it. And and you would never know that they were trans attracted simply because they were so afraid of what other people would think. Going to the nightclub and that narrative, I've had that experience many times. I've always disclosed, but then dudes are like, nah, because then they start thinking about, oh, how many people saw that I talked to you, right? They start thinking about it. There's a way in which, as Black people, we overthink it when it comes to queer and trans people. The reality is like we're a lot more accessible and I hate to say normal, but normal than I think people give us credit. And I realize it could be overwhelming, but yeah, the experience of deception, it just doesn't happen like that. I think it's the stigma that comes from other people. No one wants to be the butt end of a joke, right? As trans people, we're often the butt end of the joke. But what ends up happening is the men who are attracted to us become the butt end of the joke too. No one likes that space, right? If you didn't know someone was trans and you decide that that's not for you, like you have that right. I don't think anyone's saying that you have to then, do you see what I'm saying? But I think what scars a lot of men is that they did hit on a trans woman and then their friend is like, bruh, you know what that is? Hey, bruh, I don't think that's what you think of it, right? Like, and then it becomes a thing. But that's what we call toxic masculinity, right? Like
now your friend saying you gay. So or like that is playing in your
or your
head.
girlfriend, or you used to sleep with what? Like all those things play a part in shaping a culture that then makes trans people walking target. So when we're talking about trans women being attacked in LA, it is obviously because they are trans, right? Like that shit does not happen in the same way for other people, right? Not saying that people don't get their phone snatched when they're waiting for an Uber. That happens at the BART station all day long. But in particular, in this instance, these men were taunting these women. If you saw the video, making jokes about them, calling them a man. I'm gonna hit you like a man, hit one of the girls with a crowbar. Like that is a hate crime, right? That is a targeted offense of violence. And I think because violence is so normalized in against us, that there's a way that we think about it and we then detach. And that's what I was trying to address earlier, is that we shouldn't be normalizing it. We shouldn't ever be justifying it. When I go onto the Breakfast Club and see that people are commenting about trans women dying and being like, oh, well, you know, nowadays they be tricking. You can't tell the difference these days. And that, you can't do that. You can't justify why someone's life is being taken away from them simply because they breathe. If men are attracted to me, that's their issue, not mine. I'm just walking down the street, minding my own business. And that's often what you see too, is a lot of trans women are just being their beautiful, badass selves, walking down the street, dudes catcall, right? This happens to me on Market Street all day long. Walk down the street, hey, what's up? Hey, damn, you thick, da 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 da. 5 minutes later, that's a man, bro. Oh, that's somebody's son. Da, 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 da. Then that's when someone want to pop up and try to threaten my life, right? Like, I didn't do nothing. I was walking down the street, and I certainly wasn't checking for them. No shade, but do you see what I'm saying? But then the blame goes to trans women, and that's what we have to stop. The same thing happens to Black cis women all day long too. I saw a video on Instagram recently of this cis Black woman coming out of a gas station, and these 6 dudes were following her. And all these Black women, right, trans and cis women, were in the comments like, I know that experience. They're like, why is she smiling and try to get to her car? Because we know that experience when a group of dudes roll up on you and there's no one there to help you. And unfortunately, they're all Black men, and you're Black too. Like, there's ways that, oh, yeah, I'm gonna give you my number here you go. And I'm trying to flee the scene for my safety, right? But we have to, when we talk about understanding trans women, trans men, queer people, I think as a Black community, we also have to talk about the ways in which a lot of Black men embody toxic masculinity, and then blame Black trans and cis women for incidences that they perpetuate. Another thing that I wanted to highlight in terms of San Francisco specifically, and my computer's about to die, there is a way in which Black cis women and trans women are uplifting Black people, right? And Black men, that Black men are not doing for Black cis and trans women. Even if you are not trans attracted, as you saw with the Consciously video, I don't think it takes much to be like, bruh, that's not cool. Like, don't talk about her like that. Like, actually, she's a she, don't call her a man. Like, if we shifted the culture in those ways and intentionally thought about making it safe for everybody without it somehow translating as like, oh, I want to sleep with her. Like, this is why on Instagram, we're seeing these little memes come up that's like, protect all Black women, not just the ones that you want to fuck. That's the same, sorry for my language, but that's the same thing that I'm trying to say too, is that if Black men protected Black cis and trans women, because Black cis and trans women are protecting Black men, then I feel like we would be so much further in our journey towards liberation. So much further, and liberating everybody in the Black community.
And you know, you addressed one of this whole idea of radical unity and radical Black liberation, this idea that we are willfully tearing down the walls in our own community to build a better and stronger community overall. You, Blanca, I know you had your hand up. Taquan, did you want to expand, or did Aria cover the basis for you there?
Amazing.
Okay, thank you so much. You, Blanca, I see you had your hand up. I wanted to make sure to uplift you.
Sure, I was wanting to, oh, you guys, just thank you. I just want to say to both of you, thank you. It is the best. I've taken classes, and this top more than any class I've ever taken to understand. So, you know, my sisters and all the terms that they use, my sisters, we stand together in this bridge. I think there's still that little piece of, I want to say misconception, but I think I want to make sure we walk away from here clear that there is a difference between gender, sexuality, who we attracted to, why we decide to dress and live. So I think I wanted to just kind of get both perspectives, and especially when we have the gender non-boundary. I want to hear more from that aligned side of what it looks like, because again, I want to make sure that we walk away from here understanding clearly what the gender looks like, and how all of this sexuality and sexual orientation, like they all have their own role in our community for all sex.
And you, Blanca, thank you for that question. And just to kind of give context, I know Arya is going to jump in here, but even the question that John had asked, and it just kind of opened up this whole world that you, Blanca, is talking about. You had said, John, in the clubs, a brother might walk up to a trans sister and say, hey, what's up with it? And then outside of the club, you had mentioned, well, now they say they're a man, but that's the thing, this idea between gender and sexuality, and how, no, they're not a man, they're a woman, so this difference between gender and sexuality, Arya, to you, Blanca's point.
Yeah, so my name is Arya, and I identify as a straight Black woman of trans experience. So what does that mean? That means, as a woman, I date opposite of my gender and sex, right? So I date typically cisgender men, or sometimes trans men as well. Y'all know what a trans man is, right? Do I have to do that?
No, I don't know. Please educate me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, next time y'all gonna have to Google before y'all come talk to me. But okay.
That's what we had. That's what we had this conversation for. Is to educate.
No, I'm gonna need an honorarium now. I'm just saying. LOL. So I'm a trans woman, right? So my sex assigned at birth is male, and then I transition to female, right? So typically we use the word female and woman interchangeably, although they are separate. That's a whole nother tutorial for a whole nother day with a price tag on that. But a trans man is someone who is sex assigned at birth is female, and then they transition into manhood, right? Did your mind just explode right now?
No, I'm listening. I'm following along.
Got it.
We
So,
just
Get
never
him,
heard,
get him, get
never
him.
heard that.
So
we've never heard that ever in my life.
Exactly. This is my first time. I'm being honest. I've never heard it, so I'm trying to get educated.
Got it.
But it even goes back to what you said previously on like how things are and how men think, and how, in our communities, like with women, things are a little bit different in terms of lesbian, how we view things. It probably already have hit our ears multiple times, but we probably just was like, okay, well, whatever, those are women, whatever, right? Or however way it played in our head. But for some reason, it just didn't click. And I'm happy you educated, so we didn't know none of this stuff at all. I didn't know none of this stuff that you said.
Okay, next time y'all gonna have to pay me. But
Yeah.
in addition, I just
hopefully
I'm
both sides of the conversation can get that nice grant so we can pay you.
So I do want to specify that I am a straight Black woman of trans experience. So when I say woman of trans experience, why do I say it as opposed to trans woman? I say both. The reason why is because oftentimes people focus on the trans part more than they do on the woman part. So I've never gotten on stage, right? So I speak in different countries around the world about being trans. I've never gotten on stage and been like, I know everything there is to know about being a female. That is not something, I don't know what it's like to menstruate. I don't know what it's like to have a pregnancy scare. I don't know those things, right? This is what makes my experience slightly different than my cisgender woman sisters. However, I have so many shared experiences as a woman in the world, just by virtue of being. And I was lucky enough to know my truth at an early age and transition with my sisters while in puberty. And so my socialization shifted at an early age. So I do want to express that. But the reason why I'm straight is because I date men who usually are attracted to women of all different shapes, sizes, and hues. And so that is my particular experience. Although if someone identifies as a queer trans person, then that means that they are open to dating cisgender and transgender men, women, and non-binary people, right? It's up to them to disclose what that means for them. Just like if someone says that they're bisexual or pansexual, you know what bisexual means. If I have to explain.
Yeah, no, I know.
Explain pansexual. A lot of people are not aware of what
the
pansexual is.
pansexual. I know the bisexual, but pansexual is something new. I just heard that.
I don't fully. So I actually don't know what pansexual means as
So
much.
apparently from what I understand at least, pansexual is this idea that sexuality for you is super fluid and in the moment. You're attracted more so to a person as an individual, as opposed to this idea of male, female, trans experience, bisexual, lesbian. Like you don't care about labels at all, and you kind of live fluidly and in the moment. You're more attracted to energy than you are, identity.
That's the same
From
way
what I understand, I'm not an expert, but that's how I understand.
That's how I understand it as well. But maybe we can get a little dictionary.
I thought that was a unicorn. I thought that was a unicorn. I'm confused now.
Well, that's whoever they want to be in the moment.
He playing. He know. We've done these one-on-ones with the city before. He know. I'm like, they go through all of that when you work for the city. I know. I helped create some of those trainings. I'm just saying.
That we do HRC if you would like. And I can give folks a training, any of that information. I actually get paid for it. So if you need more information, we can get that to you and the viewers too as well.
I'm just giving y'all a hard time. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm on the Breakfast Club right now. So
I think it'd be really good to Kwame to really do something like that. Not just with us. I think like it'll be important for the Black community in general to get that type of training.
And I know
I'm down with it too.
Hey, can I just ask you one question, D'Anthony?
Yeah,
it's gonna be
of course.
Quick. So just real quick, I heard you say supporting Black men. So in a lot of the work that I do, it is advocacy around supporting Black men. I have an organization called Black Men United, trying to unite Black men in the community and trying to support them. Because a lot of times in a lot of meetings that I'm in, there's not a lot of Black men in those meetings. A lot of times it's very educated Black women, which is fine. I really don't have an issue with that. But it's sometimes the issues that's happening with Black men in that, like, for now, really aren't being addressed. And what I mean by Black men, there's layers to it. So you have the first class, right? You have, rich, middle class, poor. Then you have, as far as educational status, and then it's those different layers and different levels, right? And a lot of times the poor Black man isn't being represented by poor Black men, right? So you have someone like me, and I would represent someone, and sometimes in what I do know, I try to represent them, but sometimes I might misrepresent. So how can we, because I heard you say supporting Black men, how can we get more support around that? Because a lot of times we continue to fall short when it comes to Black men, because a lot of times they're never at those tables. I mean, I advocate, I try to get them to the table. They don't come to the table. People say they're working with them, they're not working with them, but it's like, we need more support in trying to figure out how do we get these men to the table so that we can better understand their experience and what they're actually going through down deep in the trenches.
I can speak on that as a Black man. I think that we shouldn't push the labor onto our Black women. I feel like they do a lot.
Cheryl Davis, namely.
So
Hold on, it's not just Cheryl Davis. I love
No,
Cheryl.
I know,
Cheryl,
I know.
love
You,
you.
yeah,
You
but
are still
you
my
know,
director. I adore you, but it's not just her.
no,
There's
it's
a
not.
bunch
You
of
know,
us.
I'm actually thinking about a call we had yesterday with this idea that, you know, and it was around Mega Black SF, and this idea that a lot of work in general is like projected on Black women, especially, you know, in the governmental space. And I know you know that as well, Arya. And of course, that's including your work too and your leadership. This idea of communal progress is oftentimes outsourced to Black women, you know, and I think that needs to be uplifted as well. And Taquan was doing that perfectly. So I mean, I definitely, I know it's not just Cheryl, but you know, just thinking about a call that was yesterday where they were like, we're always projecting on Black women, you know?
Y'all are. I
Yeah.
did have a question. I want Taquan to finish, but Rico and John, and the work that y'all are doing with Black men, I had a question for y'all.
Okay.
Are y'all teaching Black men about Black feminism and how to protect and promote the equality of Black women, Black sisters,
Yes.
trans women?
Yes. Oh, of course.
Y'all just pulling out Barbara Smith and Bell Hooks?
Who said it again?
Right. Right.
I'm trying to
Get them.
No. In a lot of work that we do, we definitely uplift Black women. Like that's without Black women, there's no Black man. I mean, some people say it the opposite way. Without Black men, there's no Black women, right? So I say, in my opinion, without Black women, there's no Black man, because I believe some a little bit differently. I believe women are the creation of Earth. They're like the second thing to, you know, our higher power in terms of being able to give birth. So I really lift that, and I always try to teach them to empower our women, lift them up, do as much as you can, respect your mom, respect every woman.
Protect them.
If you're a woman, you say you're a woman, I respect you. I'm gonna lift you up. I'm gonna support you. I got you. In saying that,
I just want the audience to understand that God is a Black woman. Amen. Yes. And that
Yeah, I was about
Black
to say
men-
that, Rico. My agreement with the higher spirit is totally different than most people, but I keep that to myself. But I think our Black women are the gods of this earth. We should praise them like we praise the white Jesus. So that's my opinion.
Yes. And I think that you all have a perfect opportunity to teach Black men on how to be feminist, how to be in solidarity and to promote the equality and safety of Black women. Because it's one thing to uplift Black women, right? It's a particular experience. We love you, Black women. We salute you. And then on the internet, y'all want to act crazy. I'm just saying. Not y'all. I'm talking about Black men.
Black men, right.
Or the cultural nuances that we're having to navigate with Black men right now in this moment, in this movement. And so how beautiful it would be if we were teaching Black men on how to be feminist, how to transition their masculinity into something that is in solidarity and in support of Black women and empowering Black women, because Black women are doing that. Black women have had to be the healing space for Black men, and then we nurture them. We water them like plants, teach them, support them, cheerlead them, and then they go on and then they bash us, right? And so how do we shift that culture to actually promote the safety and equality of Black women? Is to teach Black men to be feminists.
Yep, and I think we're doing that.
100%
And I know, just to hear both sides of the conversation, we wouldn't even be able to do the things we do without our Black women. And Jada, we love you guys. Asia, Kashla, all the work you guys do. So we always appreciate our sisters over here.
And
I see you, Blanca, hands is up. Go ahead, you, Blanca.
And I think also with that being said, we got to get to the door to have the interview and the conversation. We not I think for me, there's a little a power in women that have the power to hire men. We not trusting that when we have the hot power to hire Black men and insert them in the roles that will be able to bring back that bridge. It's something that I'm noticing that women, I ain't gonna just say women, Black women in power that can hire, but the power of the hand that hires is something about, we got to keep that Black man out of this work. And I think that it does start. I've been trying to say this to my brother as well. You know, we need to make sure that our young Black men know what it is to be a man. It's okay to be in touch with your feelings, okay to cry. It's okay to know how to cook and clean. It's okay to learn how to do ballerina. I think that when we have the Ricos and the John Henrys and the ones that align with the other different people, we're starting to send a different message to the community that, you know, we need to build our Black men up. And we build them up as young men, but now what are we saying to them in the conversation? And the conversation still needs to be open, because I want to be able to know that our up and coming generation can express themselves to any man, straight or gay, or and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And be able to lead them in a direction, you know, to be the nurses, to be our next Congress, to be in the positions and the places that they need to be, and recreating some of that budget in San Francisco. There's a lot of people a lot of lifers and different ones that come out that have visions and dreams and aspirations to be in some of these roles that we need them to be in. But the politics of the system sometimes is, I'll deal with a woman before I'll deal with a strong Black man. It's still a threat and intimidation. So I think we still have to work with our babies and understanding that what it is to be a man. I think you have to start with teaching them what it is to be feminine in order to be able to say, this is what a man is. And that's another conversation. But what does it mean to be a man? You have to be in tune with it all. And I think this today, and I love you all, this is a good platform and a start, so we can start showing our children that it don't start at what you see. It starts behind the scenes and teaching them how we feel and what we were told and how we're going to change it. So I would love to see some more Rico and Johns in the city halls and bring in some more of the young ones in our community that are now moved by the movements to change. But we women in power got to trust that they know what they're doing, and we have to wrap our arms around them as women and say, no matter what you look like on the outside, our Black men need these jobs, and we need to stand with them and make sure that we get what we need for the whole community.
And I would
Right. So I want to let. Okay.
Can we let
I want to let let Taquan finish, because we getting close to ending.
Yeah, because I was about
Hold
to
on.
wrap it up, but I forgot Taquan was in the queue. Go ahead, Taquan.
Nope. I don't really have much to say. I think that everything has been pretty expanded upon, so I don't want to do any circular conversation, as I'm an introvert in nature. And I just want to just kind of talk about some of the stuff that was the person's name, Yolanda, that just spoke.
No, you Blanca.
You Blanca.
Around the idea of raising our next generation of Black youth. I think that the most important thing in regards to just dismantling gender oppression, racism, is raising our Black children to be human beings, and to fully be able to live and breathe and have their lives actualized. All that rest of the stuff we can just throw out the window. I think that it's important that we raise our children with humanity and with good principles and education. I think that we need to challenge system of oppressions, and I think that we need to challenge toxic masculinity, as Aria said. And I think that it's more than just getting in touch with your feminine side or femininity or understanding manhood. I think that it's just really bringing back humanity within our community. And I feel like that's the work you all are doing here. So I think that that's going to be really important. And I think that we do need to talk about raising our Black men to love our Black women, to love ourselves as Black men too as well. How many times do you see your, brother down the street and you say hi? You know what I mean? You ask him how he's doing,
Right.
How are we practicing that self-compassion with our own community members?
Right.
That's a important thing. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I appreciate you lifting that, John. I know. Did you?
I want to give Jada a quick before we
Oh, yeah,
we
Jada,
about to get ready to wrap this up. I want Jada to get her Rico, and then I'll just wrap it up. Go ahead, Jada.
Yeah. I just want to say, I've definitely loved this panel. This has been one of my favorite panels, for sure. Thank you so much for just guiding this talk, D'Anthony, Ari, Taquan, you, Blanca. Thank you for holding it down. There's so much that was brought up that I wish we could go more into, for sure. There was so much that was said that I really want to dive into, but I know we're coming to a close. So hopefully we can get back into some of these things, because there was a lot that was said very much at the end part that I want to get into. But yeah, thank you everyone. Like I said, this is one of my favorite panels.
And thank you so much to Jada, Rico, and John for holding space. Of course, Aria and Taquan, I love y'all. And just, I'm glad to hold space with both of you, as well as you, Blanca. Thank you so much. My spiritual sister from United Church of Christ over at City of Refuge. So
hey now,
I appreciate all of this. I think the conversation starts here, and if not us, then who? And I'm hoping that we can actually build something out. I think Aria, John, Rico really connecting to see how Aria can support with developing curriculum around, teaching and dismantling. Now, for a fee, I'm trying to get the entrepreneurship plug up in there.
Here's the thing. Me and Rico belief is you can't lead the community if you don't feed the community. So you got to give them information to get them more educated. We work off volunteer and love from the community.
Let's advocate for a grant. Let's advocate for a grant to where you can do that. And one of the contractors y'all would use for that grant is Aria to really help dismantle these systems, and Taquan too, because I think in our spaces of teaching, especially Black men, cisgender men, this idea of dismantling these stereotypes is going to be important, and allowing them to be vulnerable. Like I've had more dirty looks from driving in Black communities than I have in white communities. This idea about who is that rolling up in here, and I think that comes in result of us internalizing our oppression. So, with that said, just wanted to go and just collect us back to this idea of radical unity. That's what this is about. So we are going to be radically united by the end of this. And I just want to leave it to Aria, to Taquan, to all of us on just what do you think radical unity looks like for us in the Black community?
Yeah, sure. Mine's is pretty short and sweet. I want to leave folks off with a quote from Audre Lorde, who is a Black lesbian queer woman of color who has done a lot of work around anti-oppression and challenging patriarchy, which I really hope that Black folks can really lean and research Audre Lorde. And it's a simple quote. It says, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize and accept and celebrate those differences." So those are the parting words that I lead. And thank you all for having me on this wonderful podcast.
Thanks.
Ashe. I really love I love that quote, actually. I think people need to learn more from Audre Lorde, because so much of our current movement for Black life does come from the politics that she developed as a queer Black woman. For me, I think radical unity is a culture shift, and shifting the ways that we see each other as not as single issue people, but as full-bodied people. And I wanted to leave with you all that some of our most celebrated folks have been full-bodied people that you don't get to hear about. Langston Hughes was gay. Malcolm X dated a transgender woman. Don't believe me, Google it. James Baldwin right? So much of a thought leader for Black community, but had to hide that part of himself from other Black people, except for people that were really close to him. Zora Neale Hurston, same thing. So many of our icons in civil rights, in literature, poetry, Black culture have had to hide parts of themselves to be palatable to our own people. And so what would it look like for us to accept people as full-bodied people? That to me is the seeds for radical unity. Thanks,
All right,
y'all, for having me.
Thank you. Rico, what you got to say before we close out, Rico?
I just want to say I am so happy right now. You know, I mean, radical uniting for me is exactly how I am as an individual. I think that I embrace judging individuals by the content of their character opposed to, you know, gender or sexual or preference, or like, I'm gonna judge you by your character and how you treat me. So, you know, that's just how I am. And I urge other people to think the same exact way, and respect people how they are, you know. So
I just want to say thank you guys for tuning in this week, both sides of the conversation. This was a great conversation. That was very educational, informative. I hope that the people in the community take this information with love and respect, unify radically, and let's come together and make a difference and change. Love each other, support each other, lift each other up. We got more of these conversations coming on both sides of the conversation. Please tune in this week as I'll be teaching my baby steps to investing. We got our Zoom going back, and we're going to be doing that, and we're going to continue to educate the community. We're going to continue to bring resources through both sides of the conversation to the community. So we just appreciate you guys tuning in, and we're looking forward to the continued conversation. And we're just going to end with that. We love everybody. Stay safe out there, and keep doing the great work you're doing.
thank you, D'Anthony.
Yes, thank you, D. Anthony, our great
Mr.
co-host
Jones,
today.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I ain't got nothing going on.
Jada, you can end the live, Jada. Jada, you can end the live.